This is the Candid podcast. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Before I get started on this one, I am going to add my disclaimer. I have had enough conversations with women to understand and recognize that no matter what point I make, no matter how I try to present that point, no matter how many facts I try to give to support that point, most of the time, at least in the conversations that I've had with women, if I'm not saying all men suck and all women are great, I end up getting labeled something. Now, I'm not going to stereotype all women because I know all women are not like that. But I'm just telling you from my experience, no matter how many supporting facts I have, nothing that I say, nothing that I do is going to matter. If women aren't hearing exactly what they want to hear, you're going to get labeled something. So I understand that. I'll still get labeled a misogynist or whatever you want to call me based on what I'm going to say moving forward, even though that's not true. And I'm going to give many reasons why that's not true and be clear about the point that I'm trying to make. So anyway, what I want to discuss is this all-female Nike ad that ran during the Super Bowl. So I will start out with being clear. I have no problem with women playing sports. I have no problems with women making ads. I have no problems with women making money. I have no issues with any of that. That's not my problem with the ad. The issue that I have with this Nike ad is that they continue to push this BS gender divide that seems to be going on in society and act as if men, and I guess specifically in sports, don't want women to succeed. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Nike was just playing these women because their female merch still isn't selling like the men's merch does. As of 2022, 67.4% of Nike shoppers are men. And Nike knows that pretty much no matter what they do, what kind of commercials they put out, men are still going to buy their products. It doesn't matter. Men are going to buy our products regardless. So we can anger a few of them and doesn't matter. They'll still shop with us. So they're probably trying to target the ladies, and they're using the age-old misogyny card to get women's emotions flowing and to get their sales up. The whole premise behind that ad was this anti-patriarchy undertone. It was essentially trying to say that men are always trying to hold women down or tell them what they can and can't do. So do it anyway. The commercial literally said there's one guarantee in sport. You'll be told you can't do it, so do it anyway. You can't win, so win. And it was an all-female ad. And as I said, we know what the premise behind that was. It was basically men are trying to hold women down and always tell them what they can't do, and men don't want to support women's sports. And that's just not true. And I have a bunch of examples that I'm going to give later on. It's just flat out not true. It's actually quite the opposite. But I first want to start out with talking about the women who were in the video, what sports they played. And I'll add a few quick comments on those, and then I'll get into some more specific points and pure facts in a few areas a little bit later. So we'll start out with Aryna Sabalenka. She's a female tennis player. And I guess nobody ever heard of Serena and Venus Williams back when they were dominating the tennis scene and put female tennis on the map, and they were getting more pub probably than the men at the time, which I have no issues with. Good for them. We're going to talk about Serena specifically later on. Good for them. Got no issue with it. The other person in the commercial was, or one of the other people was Jordan Chiles. She's a female gymnast. Fact of the matter is that the female gymnasts during the Olympics get way more pub than the men do. I promise you, I cannot name one male gymnast, and I'm okay with that. The female gymnasts can do things with their bodies and contort and do all these flips, and they're more exciting than the men. I've got no issues with that. I can name Simone Biles. There's Allie Raisman. There was, of course, Jordan Childs. There was one girl, I can't remember, Ali Mustafa or something. She was from a different country, but I know she was a big deal for a while. And even in this last Olympics, Simone Biles, I believe, ended up being friends with some girl from Brazil or something like that. Point is, I know those names. I literally cannot name one male gymnast. And that's okay. The women get more props because they've earned more props in that area. Another person in the commercial was Sha'Carri Richardson, female track and field runner. The fact of the matter is that nobody cares about track and field, men or women, until the Olympics comes around. Nobody really talks about track and field. The only time I could think that people were really doing that was when Usain Bolt was smashing everybody, destroying records. He was a generational talent. Yeah, he kind of got more pub even when the Olympics weren't around, but that was because he was just beating everybody and killing records. Other than that, nobody cares about track and field until the Olympics come around, men or women. Then we had women from the WNBA that were in this commercial as well. Caitlin Clark, Sabrina Ionescu, and Asia Wilson. As far as Caitlin Clark goes, people embraced her, and she brought so many eyeballs to the WNBA. And some are even calling her like the savior of the WNBA. I'll have a lot to say on that later, but Caitlin Clark has gotten a lot of props since she came into the WNBA. She's only been in there for a year. On a side note, one thing that I kind of want to go back to is like Sha'Carri Richardson, the female runner. People with her kind of attitude kind of rub me the wrong way. And it's kind of starting to become the norm. I don't have anything against Sha'Carri Richardson personally, but she has done things to herself with all the tattoos, the long fingernails, the way she talks and carries herself. I personally don't care for it. I don't feel like that is the symbol of a, quote, strong black woman. And I know a lot of people disagree with me. I just don't care for how she carries herself. And what I'm tired of is people like her, not just her, but people like her that try to say you're a hater. Or men are haters or whatever. You're just a hater because I'm a strong black woman, or people hate on me because of how I am. First of all, I don't care for the decisions that you chose to make with yourself. This is not me saying you're black or you're a woman, so I don't like you. You decided to get all of those tattoos. You decided to talk, walk, and carry yourself the way that you do. And I choose to just not like it. I'm not going to go on your social media and dog you out or wish you horrible things and hope that you fail. Sha'Carri Richardson seems like somebody who busts her butt and works hard. So if she succeeds, she deserves it. I have no issues with that. But that's another thing that I'm kind of getting tired of with some of these women that are like that. You do all these things to yourself and you go out there and present yourself a certain way. And then if somebody says that they don't like it, or, you know what, I'm just not going to rock with her, I'm going to go in a different direction, then all of a sudden we're haters. To me, it's no different than if you like rap and country comes on the radio, or you like country music and rap comes on the radio. You simply just change the channel. You say, you know what, I'm good. I just don't rock with this. This is not what I like. I don't maybe like the message, or I don't like whatever else it is. And you go in a different direction. That does not make you a hater because I choose not to worship every single thing that you do or agree with all of the decisions that you made. It's your life. You do you. I am also allowed to not like it. Stop trying to play the victim role and make everybody out to be haters, or if you don't support me, you just don't like me and want to see me fail. That's another thing that I'm getting sick of seeing. And I'm seeing it more and more from women that kind of carry themselves this way. Side point over with. Let me move on to a couple. I'm going to give like 2 or 3 examples of sports here that I was talking about earlier to kind of support that the narrative of this commercial is not true. We'll start out with tennis because this one's pretty easy. Back in 2002, 2003, Venus and Serena Williams came along and dominated tennis. They brought women's tennis to a whole nother level. They were all over ESPN, all over SportsCenter. Everybody was tuning in to see them play. Sure, being honest, race did play a bit of a factor in that because they were African Americans and they came into tennis, which is pretty much a white sport, and they dominated like they did. But it was also because these women were dominant for so long. They were just crushing people. So I don't understand the complaint or the issue here when it comes to the sport of tennis, because tennis was represented in that commercial. The Williams sisters were literally the talk of tennis over the men a lot of times, and I got no issues with that. And if we want to talk money, Serena Williams alone has made over $300 million in her career, which is more than almost any male basketball player or football player has ever made, unless you're a modern day quarterback, a Patrick Mahomes, some of these guys that are signing, $200, $300, $400 million contracts. But outside of that, they're making more than most basketball players as well, or she has. And I've got no issue with that. Good for Serena Williams. Man, woman, child, or an inanimate slug, I don't care. Serena had a market for her services that people were willing to pay that kind of money for, do endorsements with, and I have no issues with that. Fair is fair. This is not a man-woman thing. This is about getting paid what the hell you're worth based on the demand for your product, your services, your talent, whatever else you want to call it. Serena did that, and I've got no issues with it at all. Moving on to female MMA. I'm going to throw female MMA in there because that's a great example of something that started out pretty rough and uninteresting. I'm being honest. It was rough and it was uninteresting. But along came a woman named Ronda Rousey who changed the game for all of female MMA. Ronda Rousey single-handedly put women's MMA on the map by coming into her fights and literally destroying women in under a minute. And she was just arm-barring people. She would literally grapple with them for a minute, get them to the ground, get them in an armbar, and submit these women in under a minute. Ronda was bringing eyeballs to female MMA, but at the same time, she was also showing why nobody was paying attention to female MMA. The women at that time just were not as well-rounded or exciting as the men were. And one woman who came along with some fairly legit, super legit skills in one area, we ended up finding out Ronda wasn't legit when it came to a lot of striking, but she had world-class judo grappling, and she came in and just dominated these other women. That showed where the division was. Regardless, Ronda continued to dominate. And because of her performances and the attention she was drawing, she ended up being one of the highest paid fighters in UFC history. She earned $3 million for her appearance in UFC 207, and that tied her with Conor McGregor, who was probably the biggest draw in MMA ever other than Ronda, for the largest disclosed payout in UFC history. Ronda also got a crazy large payday when she fought Holly Holm, taking over like $4.5 million. And as of January 2022, Ronda was one of the top 20 richest MMA fighters in the world. A woman. Oh my God. What happened right before Ronda finally got beaten and eventually had to retire, all female MMA fighters stepped their game up, and the women came out and started putting on amazing fights. A few of the female fights were even candidate for Fight of the Year last year. And I'll never forget Amanda Nunes versus Cyborg Santos. Chris Cyborg was one of the most anticipated fights ever, given how dominant both of those women were at the time. It had nothing to do with looks or any kind of meathead BS like that. Not throwing shade at either of the women, but neither of them were lookers. And Amanda Nunes is a raging lesbian. She is as lesbian as you can get. So it's not like men were looking at them, imagining what they would be doing with them. It had everything to do with their dominant performances and both women having the skill to pay the bills, if that's what you want to say. And for even more context, if we look at the top 35 pay-per-view buy rates in combat sports since 2005, 4 in the top 35 were pay-per-views headlined by women. It was Amanda Nunes versus Rousey, Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm, Miesha Tate versus Amanda Nunes, and Ronda Rousey versus Betch Correia. And Betch Correia was a can. She was a complete can. And Rousey somehow made that fight into the top 4, fighting against a can. And did I mention the fact that 83% of all MMA fans are men? So where's the bias? Where's the bias? Notice that 3 of those 4 pay-per-views involve Ronda Rousey, which supports the fact that when women came along worth watching, men were more than happy to support that with their wallets. Women weren't buying these pay-per-views and supporting Ronda Rousey. Men were. I'm not going to say no women, of course, but when you say 83%, that's mostly men that watch MMA. And they were paying to see her, a woman. So where is this bias? Where are men that just want to see women fail? I'm not seeing it. And the last one I'm going to wrap up with, and this one might get a little long, is Caitlin Clark and all these WNBA players were in there. Because this is where I hear the most amount of this BS fallacy coming from women that men hate on the women or don't support the women in sports. And that's just a blatant lie. It's a pure, bold-faced lie. First off, once again, going back to one of my earlier points, just because I don't want to watch you, that doesn't mean that I'm hating on you. I'm just not interested. Most women have no interest in watching MMA. That is pretty much a male sport. Does that make them haters? No, they're just not interested. They don't want to see a bunch of dudes beat each other in the head for fun. They don't consider that interesting. That doesn't make them haters. One of the people that continues to push this kind of agenda that really is upsetting me is Elle Duncan. She's a reporter from, well, I won't call her a reporter. She's a studio talent from ESPN. And she's constantly trying to push this female agenda, this feminist agenda, I should say, on air. And it's really making me sick. This year, the NBA canceled a 3-point shootout on All-Star Weekend between Steph Curry and Sabrina Ionescu. They had it last year. It went very well. It was a hit. But for whatever reason, they couldn't work it out this year, and they canceled it. And here's where Elle Duncan comes in and says, the women are absolutely saying, you're no longer going to loan our names out. Steph, you want to come battle me in a 3-point contest? How about you show some love, something that you've always done in this space, and make sure you help our product grow as well, as opposed to just continue seeing you get bigger numbers when you already have them. Just a typical biased comment by Elle Duncan. Yeah, the men are just using the women. And essentially what she's trying to say is that the men need the women more than the women need the men. It's ridiculous. Not a surprise, given that Elle Duncan is also one of the people that tried to interject herself into a discussion about football and play the feminist card. The ESPN crew one day was talking about Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, ignoring the litany of probably life-altering concussions he's had and suffered because he just can't give up playing football. He wants to keep playing. He loves the game. He said he wants to keep providing for his family. And of course, as a man, he doesn't want to look like a punk. Guys want to go out on their shield. That's how most men are. They just like, you're going to have to drag me out of there. I'm not going to quit. That's just how dudes are. I'm not saying it's right, ladies, but that's just how dudes are. But anyway, feeling left out of the conversation because this was about football, something Elle Duncan's never played. And it wasn't about her. She had to come back with, as a woman who's had 2 C-sections to provide for my family, I can understand sacrifice. And then added a woman in this country whose mortality rates, a black woman in this country whose mortality rates are incredibly high. I understand making sacrifices and try to mitigate risk when it comes to your family, expanding your family and protecting your family. Now, let me be clear. I'm not downplaying the potential risk of a C-section or just poo-pooing that away. A lot of people say it's just routine surgery. Yeah, any surgery that's not on you is a routine surgery. Any surgery that's being done on you, you ain't looking at it as a routine surgery. So I'm not going to poo-poo that away. I'm not trying to say, no big deal. My point is that she found an extremely weird way to try to stick up for women. That's what she was essentially trying to do. I've got to stick up for women here, say, oh, no, it's not just men, us women, too. We have to. Now, let's say that the shoe was reversed and women were talking about C-sections and the pain and things that went along with that. And a man came along and said, yeah, man, there's a man who's broken his arm or has had a concussion. Now, no, we would get skewered for it. We would be called all kinds of things, of misogynistic and how dare you try to interject yourself in our conversation. But Elle Duncan doing that is okay. She tried to shoehorn her feminist ideals into a conversation by essentially saying, hey, wait a minute here. Hold on. Women sacrifice themselves too. Understood. But that wasn't the subject at hand. And it felt very forced and agenda driven. And this is the kind of stuff that is upsetting me here. When we go back to the WNBA, let's talk facts for a minute. Since men don't want to support the WNBA, which that right there is an out and out lie. A lot of NBA players, when they can, show up to WNBA players and show support for them. So that's a lie right there. LeBron James, Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler. There's some other guys that, I can't name them all, but they have shown up. Big time NBA stars have shown up to WNBA games to try to support them. So this fallacy, once again, that the men don't want to support the women and we just want to see them fail is bull. The WNBA has historically lost $10 million per season, and it still isn't profitable despite a record-breaking year. $10 million per season. Guess who subsidizes the WNBA? Yep, the NBA. To a cost of over $15 million annually to cover the WNBA's operating costs like travel, marketing, facilities, plane rides, administration, all that other kind of stuff. But yet they want to see them fail. Let's just throw out some world facts here. There are 4.01 billion women on the earth compared to 4.05 billion men, which essentially makes the earth a 50-50 split on gender. But yet only 44% of WNBA fans are women, meaning that 56% of WNBA fans are men. Mind blown. 56% of WNBA fans are men, but yet we want to see the WNBA fail. We want to see women's sports fail. Guess how many women watch the NBA? only 40%. So the WNBA literally only sees 4% more female viewership than the NBA does. 4%. That's it. But men are the problem. Why aren't women out there attacking other women for not supporting them? Why isn't the WNBA looking at women and saying, y'all aren't supporting your own, instead of constantly going after and trying to attack the men? Why aren't all women's sports doing that? Because the fact of the matter is that sports is still very much watched by men more than women. That's just a fact. Every sport that I pretty much looked up, including tennis, has way more male viewers than women. So why aren't women going after other women instead of trying to push this patriarchy-based BS argument and constantly try to attack men? Let me guess. I know why. It's the patriarchy's fault, because most of those little old women are just stuck in the kitchen cooking and cleaning with no jobs and no money, right? Because their men are just making them do that. Their Neanderthal husbands are taking all the money and buying tickets to NBA games, and apparently WNBA games too, and not letting these poor women out the kitchen long enough to go support their fellow women. That's what's happening. I answered my own question. Never mind. I figured it out. It's the man's fault as usual, because that's where it always falls, is on the men. It's never women's fault. It's always our fault. The fact of the matter when it comes to the WNBA specifically is a lot of their problem is the same problem as the NBA. WNBA players are simply not likable, most of them. That is why Caitlin Clark has come in and kind of captivated the WNBA. 60% of the players in the WNBA are black. And I've said the same thing again about NBA players. Most of them are not likable. Most of the WNBA players are a bunch of race baiting, tatted up, manly acting black women who have funky, aggressive, and arrogant attitudes that nobody likes. They cannot stand anything going on or any issue happening without having to make it about race, and most of them just aren't likable. You're already in a sport that is going to be tough and have an uphill battle, and then most of y'all are not likable. A lot of them are ghetto, loud, and use the fact that people don't support their behavior as fodder for race and gender-based proof of hatred. See, I'm going to go out here and act ghetto and act manly and all these other kinds of things to just make myself essentially unlikable. And then that's proof that you hate me because you don't support it. Does anybody remember when Brittany Griner of the WNBA came out saying she could beat DeMarcus Cousins, an NBA stud player, at a game of one-on-one, and her calling him little man? It's okay, little man. Brittany Griner is 6'9" and weighs 205. DeMarcus Cousins is 6'11" and weighs 270. And the man was putting up 25 points and 10 rebounds at one point, absolutely bullying people down low in the post. Just for y'all know, when I say down low in the post, it's a basketball term, kind of like what Shaq was doing, bullying people. And yet Brittany Griner comes out calling him little man and saying that she could beat him at a game of one-on-one and generally talking garbage. That's the kind of stuff that just makes the WNBA players unlikable. Why are you attacking a man? DeMarcus Cousins didn't come out and say nothing about her. But yet somehow it's still the men's fault that she attacked him and came after him and was starting beef with him. This is the exact type of delusion where the women always try to compare themselves to the men. And then when people have to give them a dose of reality, they were going around asking people, and pretty much everybody said, I would bet the farm on DeMarcus Cousins. Then we're misogynist and we're all these other things. Like I said earlier, Caitlin Clark, when you talk about the WNBA, is actually spearheading a growth in viewership in the WNBA, and people are loving it. She's attracting all kinds of fans. They feel like she has the potential to be a star. And she's brought interest to the WNBA that has been lacking for many reasons. I'm sure people will always try to use the race thing as a reason. And yeah, that may be a small factor because Caitlin Clark is white, but point blank, Caitlin Clark also comes across as a polite, well-spoken woman, and she can shoot the rock, makes her teammates better, and people are gravitating to that kind of person. I'm not a fan of her being in this Super Bowl commercial because of the undertones it has, but other than that, people are gravitating towards that. Again, that includes those 56% of the men who support the WNBA. So where's the issue there? Can somebody please tell me where the issue is there when viewership is up? 56% of the people who watch the WNBA are men, and we might have a star in Caitlin Clark. Again, a lot of it is because she's likable. And we're not talking about, oh man, she's hot or she's cute. I like the way she just, it's her personality. She's just a likable person, like Magic and Jordan and all Bird and those guys back in the day used to be. One of the pure facts that nobody wants to look at on why the WNBA will almost always struggle when compared to the NBA is that they, in this sport, the women, will always lack a certain amount of the skills and athleticism that make the NBA so entertaining. It's no fault of their own. I'm not blaming the women. It's biology. But the fact of the matter is that women's basketball lacks a lot of the high-flying, athletic, acrobatic, fast twitch, fast break form of basketball that makes the NBA so amazing. Guys running down the court full steam, leaping and dunking over another guy, or the chase down block, the one from LeBron that was famous. That kind of stuff, the high flying, will almost never be in the WNBA. I think Brittany Griner barely dunked one time on a fast break and everybody went wild. That's nothing to even high school basketball players at a certain level. Unfortunately, the women's game is very much a below the rim game of basketball where dunks are non-existent, highlight reel blocks are non-existent, the speed and the pace of the game isn't the same, the dribbling isn't the same, even the way when they go for like contorted layups and all that, some of the things that the men can do, the women just don't have that in their game. And it's actually the exact opposite of female gymnastics, which I talked about earlier, where the women are doing some amazingly crazy things that are just more acrobatic and mesmerizing than what the men do. And that's why female gymnastics gets way more props than men's gymnastics, which again, I have no issue with. In a sport like MMA, for example, this isn't an issue. MMA, and we'll throw tennis in there, where yes, the women may not necessarily be as explosively athletic or as powerful as the men, but you're not missing any of the techniques or moves or anything like that when you watch women's MMA. Women can do everything that men can do in MMA. They can armbar you, they can take you down, they can knock you out, they can punch you. There's no moves that are missing. When you go from NBA to WNBA, you are missing moves. You are missing certain things. You are missing certain athleticism, which allows them to do things that WNBA players can't do. You don't really miss that in tennis or MMA. Again, maybe some of the power, but you don't miss the actual move set. It's not the case with the WNBA. The women in those sports can do everything that the men can do, and it makes them more compelling to watch, and it makes men more compelled to support them and want to watch them and pay for them. That's just a fact. It goes back to the old adage of you eat what you unalive. Serena Williams is a great example of that. $300 million. And you won't hear a complaint out of me about that. She earned it. She cashed in on what people were willing to pay for her services. Unfortunately, that's just not the case with the WNBA, at least not yet. I think I've beaten this horse long enough. It stopped moving a long time ago, so I'm going to stop swinging now. Bottom line is that all this mess needs to stop. Men are probably pushing harder than most liberal women, at least, to get trans men the hell out of female sports so that biological women can flourish again. Yet men are holding these women back and don't want them to win. Especially when you talk about that subject, women need to be going after a lot of these liberal women who keep saying trans women are real women. It's us biological men that are like, nah, that ain't gonna work like that. They need to get up out of there and allow women to flourish again in their own sports. But yet, like I said, we're trying to hold women back. Now, if you want to talk about corporate America, then that might be a little bit of a different story. The argument gets a little bit more complex if you're talking about corporate America, because yes, people can do sneaky and underhanded things to stunt your professional growth, undermine you, deny you promotions, do things behind the scenes if they just don't like women. That's a little bit different, but fair play, that happens to everybody, men and women, but it still may happen more to women in corporate America because men don't want to see, some men may not want to see a woman rise up the ranks in corporate America. But even there, it's getting better. You're seeing a lot more women CEOs and a lot more women CTOs and CFOs and all that. You're seeing a lot more women rise up in corporate America. But in that area, I could see a little bit more of an argument, but it doesn't work like that in sports. In sports, if you go out there and you show out and you put on a valuable product, man or woman, people will buy it, period. This isn't corporate America. People will buy it. There is also much more of a chance of the harassment of, that kind happening to women in corporate America. I acknowledge that. It is more of a thing and it is more of a factor. I will acknowledge that. But again, when it comes to sports, production is all that matters. I just gave you a whole bunch of proof that if women put out a product that people are compelled to see, the numbers flat out show that men, because men are the people who watch sports more than anybody, will support your product with their wallets and their eyeballs. Period. Point blank. Nike needs to be ashamed of themselves for continuing to stir up this gender-based divisive BS, and it needs to stop now. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you once again for listening. If you're watching or even listening on YouTube, please hit the like button, subscribe, or leave a comment, or feel free to do all three. It helps me out a lot. I want to continue to help bringing you all great content and making podcasts that I hope you enjoy and you get something out of. Again, thanks for listening. And as always, I will catch you on the next one.